A new Overwatch patch has hit the PTR, with a new map, major changes to Hanzo, and a number of nerfs to other heroes. So let's quickly run down what's in it, and then we can break down how these changes will impact the game. A new escort map, Rialto, has been added to the game. This is the same map that was used for the Retribution mission event. Hanzo's scatter arrow has been removed and replaced with two new skills. The first is Storm Arrows, which allows him to quickly fire up to 6 fully charged arrows, but they have a lower damage than his normal shots. The second is Lunge, which allows him to leap horizontally when jumping. His projectile speed has also been boosted from 85 to 100, which is a huge buff. Sonic Arrow's cooldown has also been reduced from 20 seconds to 12, but the duration and radius have also been reduced. Genji's deflection hitbox has been reduced in size, Junkrat's Riptire will now travel slightly slower, and his projectile size has also been reduced. Lucio's wall ride has been heavily reworked, making him essentially more sticky. His Soundwave skill will also no longer consume ammo. Brigitte's shield bash has also been changed. The cone angle of its impact has been reduced from 90 to 60, and lastly, Tracer's pulse bomb's maximum damage has been decreased from 400 to 300. First of all, let's take a look at the Hanzo rework. Overall, these changes result in a net buff. However, the new skill is definitely weaker than Scatter Arrow, because while you can theoretically do more damage with the rapid fire arrows by landing every shot and also being able to headshot, this is very unlikely to happen consistently, and it's much easier to throw a Scatter Arrow into someone's feet and secure an easy kill. However, the increase in his projectile speed makes him much more deadly at medium range. The changes to Sonic Arrow are also a major buff. Thanks to the shorter cooldown, you can now make much more use of it as the enemy repositions, and the nerfs to its radius and duration have very little impact. Lunge is also a substantial buff to his mobility that allows him to disengage from fights much easier. It's also very effective at dodging slow moving projectiles. Overall, this definitely raises Hanzo's viability and his skill cap. The projectile speed and Sonic Arrow changes in particular are what might see him become more popular in the meta. Being able to reposition the arrow more often provides so much more information for your team and makes it easier for you to line up shots. Next up, we have his brother Genji, whose deflect hitbox has been reduced in size. This is a nerf that's been requested for a long time. Previously, the hitbox was very large, extending out way beyond the animation for the skill, and you could often feel robbed when trying to shoot someone behind him. This change has made this less likely to happen, but the reflect hitbox still remains more than big enough to cover the front of Genji completely. It's certainly a nerf, but it shouldn't hurt him that much. Lucio's wall ride also got a massive rework in this patch, which is dividing opinion. He's now much less likely to come off a wall, and can easily coast around corners both inside and outside buildings. This has made Lucio a lot easier to pick up for beginners. However, it's definitely lowered his skill ceiling, and made a lot of the tricks that experienced Lucio players would use either not work or be less effective. The speed bonus you get when leaping off a wall has also been reduced, which makes things even more frustrating for seasoned players. While this part of the patch is dividing opinion, one part of the patch that every Lucio player is happy with is that Soundwave will no longer require ammo to use, a small but great buff. The changes to wall ride are probably going to result in a nerf in high level play, as the movement is now more predictable, but we'll have to wait and see what happens as top tier players adjust to the new mechanics. Brigitte's shield bash change is not really a nerf or a buff, as it depends on the situation. Essentially, when in the middle of a fight, shield bash would often hit enemies that should really have dodged it. By reducing the angle of its impact, this is less likely to happen. However, it also now makes it easier for Brigitte herself to avoid enemies trying to body block her. It was common in the middle of a fight to try and hit a target, only to have someone else just move into your line of sight and collide with them instead. This is a bit less likely to happen now. Junkrat also received two nerfs. The first is to Riptire, which will now travel a little bit slower, giving a slightly longer window for enemies to try and destroy it. The second change, however, was much larger, and that was reducing the projectile size of his grenades by 33%. Obviously, the actual physical size difference is fairly small, but mathematically this is a large reduction in the size of the grenades. Overall, this won't really have a noticeable impact on his ability to deal with tanks and barriers. Anything big, he's still going to melt, but against smaller targets, it should be a bit harder for him to land direct hits. This was an unexpected change, as most people were asking for nerfs directly focused on Riptire. It is possible that this lowers his average damage and in turn impacts the ultimate charge rate, but it does seem like a strange way to nerf him. Lastly, Tracer's pulse bomb was reduced from 400 maximum damage to 300. This is a direct nerf to her ability to solo kill tanks. Previously, a stick would be enough to kill a Zarya as soon as her personal barrier was on cooldown, and with a few extra shots or a Discord orb from Zenyatta, it could also make mincemeat of Reinhardt and Winston. With the damage reduced, Pulse Bomb will either require more investment from your team to take down a tank, or it can be used just the same as it always has been against DPS and support heroes. However, what is quite interesting is that this is also a buff for Brigitte, as her ultimate will take your average 200 health heroes up to 350, so they would be able to survive the blast. Most importantly, however, it's a buff for tanks, and after the most recent changes to Reaper and Mei, tanks are in need of some love. What do you think of this patch? Do you hate the Lucio changes? Does Junkrat need something different? Let me know in the comments. As always, this is James for Curse, saying thanks for watching, and enjoy the game.